In the manual payment posting part of the webinar, we're going to look at, firstly, how to enter patient payments, review on-account payments. We'll also look at how to enter those insurance payments as well as apply the insurance payments. So first, we'll look at how to enter a patient payment. The easiest and the fastest way to enter a patient payment is from the patient screen. So we're going to go to the patient screen, and it brings up the patient search. Here you can search for the patient. So I open that patient. So once the patient screen opens, on the left hand side you've got the enter payment. You can click on the enter payment to add a payment for that patient. So that opens up into the payment entry screen, and in the payment entry you can select the payment type, what type of patient payment it is, whether it's a copay payment, or it's a self-pay payment, or it's a deductible payment. You can select the appropriate payment type from this drop-down. The dates will always default to today's date, but if you want to change the date, you can change the date here. The accounting date is considered as the transaction date. It's always good to keep the accounting date and the which is the transaction date, and the payment date as the same. Next, in the total amount, you can enter the amount. You also have fields to enter comments, or if you want to keep a batch number, you can also enter the batch number into the PSTS number field. Next, we can select the pay method, how the patient paid the payment, whether it was a cash, check, credit card. You get the fields to enter that information. So let's say if the patient made a cash payment, we can select cash here. You can save the payment by hitting the save, or you can also do a save and print, which is you can save the payment and hit the save and print option to print a receipt for the patient. You have the save and apply, which if the charge has already been created for this patient, you can take this payment and hit the save and apply. That is, after the payment is created, it would bring up the payment posting screen for you to manually post that payment to the patient's account or patient's charge. So first, let's look at where the payment is just going to be saved. So I'm going to just hit the save here, and that would add the payment. So a payment was saved. There was also a payment number that showed up on the green message at the top just after the payment was successfully saved. Let's see how you can find this payment. So if you want to look for this payment, you can go to the patient's ledger, and on the patient's ledger, if you look at the bottom of the ledger, you can see there's an on account. This shows you all the patient on account money, which is payments that have been added for the patient but have not been applied yet. If I click on this, it also brings me to the payment search screen where I can see those payments. From here, I can either hit the apply button to open that payment into the payment posting screen, and from here I can hit the search to list the patient's charges to post this payment to the patient's charge. We would be looking at the posting, or which is the applying of the payment, in just a moment, so I'm going to close out of the screen for now. I'll also close out from this payment search screen. So that was the easiest way that you can add a payment to a patient. Just hit the enter payment, and you can select what type of payment it is and then enter the amount and save that payment. So once a payment is added, as you saw, that payment gets added into the patient's on account, or shows up in the patient's account as on account money, which is unapplied. Now, if you want to add any other types of payments like insurance payments or even patient payments, you could do it from the payment entry screen. So we're going to go next to look at the payment entry screen. So I'll close out of the patient screen, and under the payments menu on the menu bar, you would have an enter edit payment. So I'll click on the enter edit payment, and that brings us to the payment search screen. From this screen also you have on the top right hand side an add payment entry, which you can click on to add a new payment. First, let's just look at the fields that you have on the payment search. Now, these fields you can use for, or filters you can use for searching payments that have already been added. You can use the payment date, the payment number, which is the system generated number for every payment. If you have added any reference number on the payment, you can also search with the reference number, check number, payer entity. If it's a patient payment, you can select the payer entity here as patient, or if it's an insurance payment, you can select the payer entity here as insurance for the search. If it's a patient or an insurance, you can also select the payer name this for the payment for a specific patient or payer. You can just type that in here once you've selected the payer entity. You can also search with the payment type, whether it's a claim payment you want to search, which is an insurance payment, or a co-payment or self-pay payment. You can select that from this drop-down. You also have the field to search with the PSTS number, which is the batch number. I'm going to just use the date here for search. So I'm going to hit the year to date, or select year to date from the date range, which will fill the payment date from and to. So I'll hit search, and it shows me all the payments that have been added for that date range. When the results get displayed, you can see the first field here is a payment number, the date of the payment. If there's any reference number added for the payment, you will see it on the reference number field. The type of payment, whether it's a co-payment, claim, whether it's a refund or it's a self-pay payment, you can see that as a type. Then the total amount on the payment, how much of it is applied, and what's unapplied. You can also see the payer name. If it's a patient payment, the payer name will be the patient's name. If it's an insurance payment, you will see the payer name as the insurance company name. Next is the status, and you're going to generally the status you're going to see is new, partial applied, and fully applied. If you want to void off payments, you can void the payment, and voided off payments or refunds will also show the status as void. So when a payment gets added first, it always adds it with a new status. When you have some amount applied from that payment, which means that the whole amount is not applied, it has a partial applied status for it. When the whole amount of the payment gets applied, that's when the system would change it to a fully applied status. The next is the PSTS number field. If you've got a batch number saved on the payment, you can see the batch number here. The batch number can also be auto-generated by the system. If you want the system to generate a batch number, you have a generate option for the system to auto-generate the number. If this was an insurance payment, and if the insurance payment was created from an electronic remit, you would have a link here to click and view the electronic remit. The print is to reprint a patient payment receipt. If you click on the print icon, it brings you or opens a receipt screen, which you can use for reprinting or printing the payment receipt. The apply option opens up that payment into the payment posting screen. So if you hit the apply, it's the same as we saw from the ledger screen where when we clicked on the on account and brought up the payments, we hit the apply there. That brought up to the payment posting screen. So it brings you to the same payment posting screen. Now once it opens up the payment posting screen, you can always hit the search here to list the charges for that patient. So you can see these are the open charges for the patient. And here you can enter the amount that you want to post to. And so this is a $30 payment. So if I want to post this $30 here, I can enter $30. Now there's also a checkbox on the right hand side which is auto populate paid amount. This will auto fill in the paid amount, which is the on account money, will get filled in into the copay amount field, so that way you don't have to actually enter the amount. The system will automatically fill it for you. So I'm going to check this and show you how that works. So I'll hit search, and you can see that it brought that $30 right into the copay amount field. So whatever is the balance, it's going to put that amount, it's going to take the on account and put that amount looking at how much is the balance. So here we can hit post, and that will apply that payment. So let's hit post here. It shows a payment was successfully posted. On the top right hand side it shows a posting log, and it has that money applied. Now I'm going to close out of the screen. We're also going to look at the payment posting screen in detail in just a moment. So I'm going to close out of here, and let's go back to this payment search screen. So we clicked apply. The edit or view option opens that payment onto the payment edit screen, and from here you can actually edit payment if you want to edit it. You can edit the payment or make changes, modifications to the payment. Now you can only make full modifications to a payment if the whole amount is unapplied. If there's any amount that's applied, the system will only allow a partial edit, like you might be able to change the amount or the pay method. There are only a few things that you may be able to change when there is amount applied. So if you want to make changes to a payment that is generally not allowed for partially applied payments, you would have to reverse that entire money on the payment, and then you can apply it. The next is a refund. Now, if there's any unapplied money on the payment, if you want to refund it back to the patient, you can use this refund option for that. We'll look at the refund part of it in a little bit, so I'm going to skip that, and also we're going to skip the bulk reverse for now. Both of those will be covered later in the webinar. So let's now look at how you can create payments from this payment entry screen. So for you to add a payment, let's say you want to add an insurance payment, you can click on the add payment entry on the top right hand side of the screen. That will bring you to the add payment screen. Over here you can see the accounting date is already defaulted to today's date. Now if you want to enter a different accounting date, you can change that date. The payment date, you can enter the date of the check. As I was saying before, it's always better to keep the accounting date and the payment date as the same. This is typically for the reporting purposes, because most reports in the system are run using the accounting date. And so if you want to kind of get a total of the deposits or total by the payments, it's always best to keep both the dates the same. But if you would like to keep it different, that is if you want to go by what is actually or when it was entered, or based on the date it was entered into the system, you can keep the accounting date as the date of the entry. Sometimes you may also want to reconcile, or some customers may want to like to reconcile between what was deposited into the bank versus what was entered in the system. So to match or have that kind of reconciliation, it's always good to have the accounting date as a date that it was posted in the bank or it was received in the bank. So here I'm going to enter the payment date as to the actual check date or the FT date. Next, we're going to select the payment type. So you can select what type of payment is being entered. Here I'm going to enter an insurance payment. So the type that we can select here is claim. So you can see the payer entity automatically defaults to insurance. I'm going to type in the insurance name. So it shows from my insurance list, and I can click and select that insurance. In the total amount, I'm going to enter what the check amount is. If I want to enter any comment or have a batch number generate, I can hit the generate button to have the batch number generate. In the pay method, I'm going to select what type of or how the payment was actually made, whether it was a check or an EFT pay. I can select this and choose the or select the appropriate method. So I'll enter the check number in here. Next, we can hit the save to have the payment saved, which means that you can, that's if you don't want to apply it now, you want to just apply it later, you can just hit the save here. You can use the payment search to search the payment and apply it later time. If you want to apply it right now, you can hit the save and apply. Now, before you hit the save and apply, this apply screen, which will open up into the manual posting screen, which we just looked in a little bit before, it opens up as always as a pop-up. So when you're hitting the save and apply, and if the screen doesn't come up for you, make sure that you don't have pop-up blockers enabled. If you have pop-up blockers enabled, it will block that window, that payment posting window. So always when you hit the save and apply, if you see nothing happens, this is one check that you can make sure. You can add the payments allowed list, or sorry, the pop-up allowed list, or you can just disable the pop-up blocker. So here I'll hit save and apply, and there it opens up into this payment posting screen. Now, once it opens up into the payment posting screen, in the top you can see all these grayed out fields. These are all the payment information we entered. So the date of the payment, the accounting date, the entry date, the check date, the payment type, the insurance, check number, all that information can be seen here. To the right, you can see the payment number, the total amount on the payment, what's applied, and what's on account. So this keeps a running total. As in when you go and apply this, you will see this numbers change. Then on the posting log, you're going to see to which patient, date of service, and amount this was applied to. Now to select the patient, I'm going to click on the patient field, and I'm going to type and select the patient. So I'm going to select the patient, and when I select the patient, you can see that it shows the patient's charges. Now once the patient's charges get listed, you can see the procedure code, the date of service from and to, the claim number, or the patient control number. Here when I was actually selecting the patient, or to bring up the patient's charges, I selected the patient. Another way that you can also bring up the patient's charges is using this claim number. The claim number is a system generated number. Every claim that you submit from the system, the claim number goes out along with that claim as a patient account number or patient control number. Now when you receive the remit back, you will also see this number on the remit. So you can always search the claim either using this, of course, the patient's name or the patient's record number. But in addition, you can also use a claim number. So you can just enter the claim number into this field and hit search, and that will also bring up this claim. So I'm going to just demonstrate to you. I'm going to type in that claim number in there, or I'm just going to copy and paste that claim number, and we'll hit search, and you can see it brought up that claim for me. Next, on the charge, we're going next is the charge amount and the remaining balance on the line. Now here in the next field, we have the allowed amount. This is where you can enter the allowed amount, as you see on the EOB. Now when you type in the allowed amount, and if it shows with a red color text, that means this amount is less than what's in your fee schedule, or for this procedure, the allowed amount that has been set for the fee schedule, this amount is less than that. If you looked at the fee schedule part of the or the charges webinar, you would have seen that you can set up a standard fee schedule with the general allowed amount, or you can also set up custom fee schedules, which is contract-based fee schedules with contract amounts. So based on that contract amounts, that is if you have set up the contract amounts, and if you're being underpaid here, the system is kind of flagging you, telling you that you have got a payment lesser than what you were supposed to be receiving, or what is as per your fee schedule. There are also variance reports that you can run in the system that tells you the difference, like when you actually, at some point in time, if you want to run to see what payments you got underpaid, there is this report that you can run to reconcile and find those payments that have the variance. So the next is a paid amount field, and this is where you can enter the paid amount. Now, when you enter the allowed and paid, as I did here, the system will auto calculate the adjustment and have a balance. So here, because there have been payments already posted in this line, so that's why it's got an over adjustment done. But typically when you enter the allowed and paid amount, the system will auto calculate the adjustment and show you a balance. Now, once you have entered the allowed and paid, next you have a 2 copay, 2 deductible, and 2 coinsurance field. Now, if there's any balance on the line and you want to show that the balance, or why the balance is being billed, you want to say this is a balance of $30 that needs to be collected from copay for copay, and maybe there is a remaining of $30 which is a coinsurance balance. You can enter it into this field. Do note that these fields are not part of any balance calculation. This is just for information purposes when you're posting the payment, and when you look at the patient's ledger at some point of time, or when you run reports, you can see how much was the 2 copay or 2 coinsurance or 2 deductible that was applied for the balance. Next, if there is any adjustment, you can also select an adjustment reason from the drop down. Now, the next action here is what is used to show who's responsible for the balance. You can see that this patient has a primary insurance and also a secondary insurance. So when we entered the primary paid amounts, since the patient has a secondary, the system automatically sets the next action, which is the next responsibility, to bill to SE, which means bill to secondary. If the patient did not have a secondary, the system would have put this to the bill to PT, which means bill to patient balance. Now let's say if you don't want the balance to be going either to the secondary or to the patient, and you want to write off the balance, you can select WO close here. So when you select the next action as WO close, what the system would do is that when you select the next action, and of course hit the post here, post option, the system will post this payment as well as write off the balance, so it does not get billed to any or does not go to any responsibility, either the patient or the secondary. Now in this case, generally you want it to go to the secondary, so you would keep the next action as bill to SE. So if the patient has a secondary insurance, it would show in the next action as bill to SE, which is bill to secondary. Now for payment such as Medicare, where the crossover happens, where the insurance crosses over to secondary insurance, you can also check this box COB. The COB means that a crossover happened between Medicare primary to the secondary insurance, which means that you don't want a secondary claim to be generated from the system. So if you check this box, a secondary claim does not generate from the system. So once we have entered all the info, we can hit the post at the bottom to have the payment applied. So I'm going to hit the post, and that'll apply the payment. You can see that it shows this patient date of service and the amount that is applied. Now you can see that it shows the on account remaining, and $20 was applied. Now if there's any other patient that you want to apply this payment to, or if there are more patients you need to apply, so you can pick the next patient here on this list. Again, you can use either the claim number or the patient's name or record number to find the patient and select it. So there, I pick the next patient. So this patient will do the same. We'll enter the allowed amount. So let's say if the allowed amount is $80 and paid amount is $50. And see the system auto calculates the adjustment and shows the balance. There's a next action, and you can select if you want to override that status, you can select that. Now, other than the bill patient, bill guarantor, the right of close that we saw, there's also the claim sent to PR and rebuild. The claim sent to PR is or it's the first status on the next action list. So the first status always is going to be what the current responsibility of the claim is. If it is sent to primary insurance, it'll show sent to primary, or if it's rebuilt to primary insurance, it'll show claim rebuilt to PR on the status. You can also, if you want this next action to be set to rebuild to PR, you can select the next action as rebuild to PR. Now, also there is a paid close status. Similar to W close, there's also a paid close status. The paid close status would be used by the system to close off a line, just as the W close is used to close off a line where it writes off the balance or where there's an adjustment. It uses WO close status. The system uses the paid close status based on what you enter in the allowed and paid amounts, and it uses that for closing off the line. So we'll just look at it in just a moment. What is the difference between the W close and paid close? So before that, let me just post this payment. So I'll leave it on the bill to secondary, and we can either hit post, or if there are more payments here from other date of services for the patient to apply, we can enter on the other date of service as well. So here I'm going to show you what the difference between paid close and right of close is. So I'm going to enter an amount, and okay, so you can see that in the first line I entered an allowed amount, paid amount, and there's a balance which I can either use a WO close or adjust off the balance. I can also adjust off. There's a $30 balance there. I can enter 350 to adjust off the balance. So you can see the system used WO close as the next action. So the system will use the status for closing off the line, either WO close, paid close, based on what's entered in the allowed and paid amount field, which is if you enter allowed and paid amount as the same as I did on the second line, and if there's no balance, the system uses the paid close status. However, if you use the allowed and paid as different amounts and adjust off the balance, the system would use a WO close status. So though both statuses can be used interchangeably for closing off a line, but the system has a small logic that it uses based on what you enter in the allowed and paid. If it sees it as the same, it uses the paid close for closing off the line, but if it's different, it uses the WO close. So here we'll hit the post payment, and there it applies those payments and shows you those payments that were applied on the posting log. Now when you're posting payments, there are also tabs at the bottom. Whichever line that you click on here, there will be tabs that would show you for those lines, and you can either add a line substatus. Typically if the line is denied, that's when you would use a denied line substatus, or you can use other line substatuses. You can add your own line substatuses as well. We'll be discussing about addition of line substatuses in the administrator portion of the webinar, of the payments webinar itself. But you can select line substatus. If there's denials, you can enter category code, denial code, remarks. If you want a patient's remark to patient statement added here, if you're setting this to a bill to patient status, and if you're adding, or if you want a remark to be added, you can add it there. You can also enter an EOB number. When you're adding payment, there is an option to upload an EOB file, a PDF file, and you can also reference the EOB page number, which the system can also, when you're printing secondary claims, the system can use based on the EOB page number from the PDF file that is uploaded for that payment. It can automatically pull those pages along with the claim forms when you're printing the claim forms and the to print the claim forms, and it can bring those EOBs along with the claim forms for printing. There's also line activity tab. You can see line activities. There's other adjustment tab which you can use if you want to add additional adjustments, more adjustments. You can add additional adjustment. Now, to add additional adjustment reasons, like if you want to add reasons to this list, you can, if you want to add additional adjustment reasons, we're also going to discuss how you can do that in the administrator portion as well of this payments webinar, as to how you can add additional adjustment reasons from the claim lookups area. So that was all about manual posting of payments.